have Anu Shultes, who is the Chief Executive Officer of LendUp, joining us. I apologize, the slide that you saw preceding my beautiful face. I'm Zach Miller, Tearsheet editor as well. It misspelled her name, so Anu, I'm very sorry about that. Let's bring Anu up. There she is. Can you?
Hello.
Hi, Anu. Hi. I'm just going to change your name here. We had a little bit of a technical difficulty.
No worries.
Anu. And thank you for bearing with us. I appreciate that, Anu.
No problem. Happy to be here.
Great. We're very happy to have you as well. So can you, yeah, this was an exercise in resilience. So thank you for joining us.
That's right.
So can we start our session first by you introducing yourself and telling us a little bit about your background?
Yes, sure. Anu Shultes. I'm CEO of LendUp Global. We're a mission-driven company. We focus on underserved customers, helping them through financial education as well as loans to get to better financial health. My background is basically financial services pretty much most of my career.
I'm sorry to hear
that. Probably like, without dating myself, I want to say I've been in financial services almost 25 years. I had a 2-year detour where I actually was at home shopping at work. I learned a bunch of cool things there. But I've been focused on underserved for the last 13 years or so. And prior to that, I spent almost all of my time on lending, credit cards, home equity, you name it. So kind of steeped in those two tracks, I would say, lending as well as underserved customers.
Wonderful. And where are you joining us from today?
I live in the Bay Area, San Francisco Bay Area. I live in a suburb about 25 miles to the east. Yep.
Great, thank you. So let's start. I think the bulk of what we're going to talk about today is how LendUp responded organizationally to some of the challenges posed by our current thing. So I know you wanted to talk about sort of stabilization. Can we talk about sort of what you did initially once you figured out what was going on to kind of get control of the situation?
So, before we even figured out what was going on, first things first, right? We had to figure out how to be remote 100%, right? We're a lending company. We lend to customers who are shut out of mainstream. So having a call center is really important to us. For our customers, we're almost a lifeline. So how do you go take a regulated company from 100% at work, like in the workplace culture, to 100% remote over just, with half a day notice? Like when the counties that I work and live in announced together that they're going into shelter in place, we had like 4 hours notice. And so that was the very first step, right? Figuring out how to do that. We had actually kind of anticipated that this might happen for about a few weeks before that. And so we were ready for it. I mean, we had already gone to 50% at work and 50% at home. So that was the first thing. Once we got that figured out, which by itself was a big task, we then turned our attention to the business aspects of how do we react to this, right? What happens to our customers? Can we continue to lend to our customers? What do we do moving forward? What happens to the business? So that's kind of where we kind of started our journey on, let's get everybody home, let's get everybody productive, and then at the same time start to figure out what is going to happen to the business. Did you want me to kind of go into the details of that, or
I would like to hear more details about that. Yeah, but before you do, can you also give us a little bit of insight into who the customers are and what their challenges are? Yeah,
so our customers, are they're about $45,000 to $50,000 in income. We basically have customers who may have a bank account. Actually, they do have a bank account. But they have no access to any kind of products. They don't have a credit card. They don't have access to any kind of loans. Most of them are renters. And at the end of the day, they're looking for, and they have zero in savings. So when they have a mild shock, right, for a mainstream customer like you or I, it would be a mild shock to have I wouldn't even call it a shock if you have a blown tire, for example, right? It's a $250 expense. LendUp customers typically don't have that. So we end up being that provider for them. We have a very easy online application where they come to us and we give them a short-term loan where they can borrow, around $300. But our whole process, we then hold their hands. We have financial education. We teach them how to manage their money better. and over time they can graduate to, slightly more money for, slightly lower rates and so on. So our goal is really to get them the immediate funds they need, and then hopefully put them on a path towards better financial health.
Got it. So let's go back, I guess, to the story at hand. As the shelter in place directives come, you're already at 50-50, it sounded like?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I had gone to a conference in Seattle the first week of March. And I don't know how many people remember now, that was like the early epicenter, right? And so I was on the ground in Seattle for a one-day conference, and only half the people showed up on day one. And by the second day, half of those people left. And it was sort of an early window into how serious this could be. And then I came back home, and immediately there were, that day I had been in Seattle, there had been 4 deaths that night. So it was just a sort of a shock to our system. And so I kind of huddled with my executive team, and I said, this could get bad, so we should be prepared to start to figure out how to get our workforce to stay safe. And so we had kind of started to kick off a process to take our workers who didn't have to be in the office. We kind of encouraged them to stay home starting that week. But then we still had the call center on site. And so when the shelter in place order came, we were able to quickly transition to no one's coming in starting tomorrow. So that was sort of a very rapid, I think the announcement came out, if I recall correctly, around 1 p.m. Pacific time, and close of business is 5 p.m., right? So we had to tell everyone, hey, take what you can, what you need, we'll figure out the rest, over time.
And did you deal with headcount issues at this moment in time? Like, when do you start thinking about the right levels of staffing and things like that?
So, my tendency and in general in life is to not have a knee-jerk reaction. So what I kind of said was, let's take stock of what's happening, right? So we got into shelter in place. We made sure like everybody's able to log in. Our agents are able to take calls, just, the basics of, do they have a desk at home, right? You're talking about people living in the city, in confined spaces. But at the same time, we started to look at what are the external factors, what's happening outside, right? What's happening with employment. There's definitely felt like there was widespread panic in the business environment. I was talking to board members. We instituted daily executive meetings. And over the next 4 weeks, really made an assessment of what is possible, right? We are a high-risk lender. We lend to high-risk customers. Can we stay in business, right? Can we continue to lend? Should we pull down immediately and just wait and see? And talking to my lender, right? So over the next 4 weeks, we kind of started to think about what do we need to do. So we focused on cautiously pulling back. So for example, we pulled back on the amounts. We pulled back on the duration, right? We used to do 1-year loans. We said, okay, let's start by just limiting it to 4 so we don't cut off our customers when they need us most, but continue to lend. And we didn't make those changes for like about 6 to 8 weeks. We had time to really assess what's going on with the marketplace, what's happening with our customers. Obviously customers started to call us about help. And so we had a lot of data points before we made the decision to pull back on, whatever cuts we needed to do. Once we did that, it took another few weeks to figure out what is the long-term impact on the financials. What is the impact if revenue is going down? Obviously we have to cut costs. So it was I would say a thoughtful process before we made any changes to staffing. And even with that, we focused on how do we keep the most people employed. And to the extent that we can't keep everybody, how do we make sure that they keep their benefits, the health benefits specifically? So we focused on a combination of furloughs and salary cuts to kind of figure out a cost basis.
Yeah, I'm sure those decisions were very hard. Yeah.
Yes, excruciating. Yes.
So I guess that's a good segue into my next question. I mean, so you mentioned you implemented daily executive meetings. How did you communicate sort of what was going on to the rest of the company, and how did you think about like context and tone and frequency? Like, this is a new area for everybody. Yes. So take us through that.
So I would say that, personally, I'm just a transparent person, and I believe in just being honest, right? To the extent that we can legally share. So my immediate concern was my employees, right? So there's, of course, keeping board members and investors informed, trying to do the right decision, right? And there's no playbook, right? The last pandemic was in 1918, like the widespread, right? Pandemic was 1918. There's no playbook. No one really knows what to do. We're kind of figuring it out. So the focus was through the executive meetings. We kind of quickly realized we need to get in front of the employees. So we had and we continue to do that today, is we have all hand meetings. So we have Zoom meetings where everybody's on, and we were very clear about, this is what we're working on this week. We're working through the changes. When we made the decision to make the changes to, say, criteria and loan amounts, the actual work was done over a weekend. So the team did come together to implement the changes, but then it also involved training the call center folks, to prepare for what's coming. So every step of the way, I would say we focused on very broad and transparent communication within the team. And even when changes were made to, team, whether that's furloughs or cost cuts, we got in front of the team and not only talked about what's happening to the business, but also walked through the decisioning process, right? And when the furloughs did happen, I know that people were not surprised, because I'd had other meetings saying, hey, I'm working on this. I'm looking at revenue cuts. I'm looking at these things. So I think they understood that we were all struggling together and we were going through the process. So that was, I think, a very important piece of how we managed this, is just having difficult conversations, right? As a CEO, to get in front of your staff and say, hey, I have to think through this. I don't have all the answers for you, but I'm going to try to get them to you in a week or two. Right? That was tough. I mean, I think it was sobering to say, I'm struggling as well. This is new to me, right? This is new to everyone. There's no playbook. Yeah.
Yeah, it does sound very tough and sobering as you describe it. And so I guess, given this was a new scenario, there's no playbook. How do you stay strong mentally? How do you have the stamina to keep showing up every day? This is sounds very challenging. And first of all, I appreciate your level of transparency and sharing this with us. So
yeah, no, this, people who know me generally know that I do say it like it is, and so sometimes I need more coaching on what to probably should hold back. Look, life has a way of teaching you lessons, right? So personally, I've been through some challenges in life. I dealt with cancer about 12 years ago now. And you cannot realize that in the moment, there's a feeling of, there's panic, there's anger, there's like, oh my God, what's happening? But the reality is life goes on, it's great that I made it, right? But if I didn't make it, life would have still gone on, right? The world doesn't stop. Every day happens, every day the sun comes up, and every day we have to move forward. And so that is my philosophy in life, is that when you're dealing with a challenge, clearly we didn't anticipate it, right? Whether it was cancer, or whether it's, losing a job, or whether it's a pandemic, no one's anticipating it. So how do you deal with so much uncertainty? So we focus on what we can control. And just my philosophy is, this too shall pass, right? I think people get extremely stressed because we are attached to the way things are, right? I want my life this way, right? I plan to have a career this way.
I don't want it ever to change.
Right.
Yeah.
I expected to stay at this company 10 years, but looks like now I have to leave, right? But as soon as we let go of that attachment, we open ourselves up to possibilities, right? So I think we can all move forward. We cannot say it is a new normal, and how do we manage, to the new normal? And how do we look for things that we can control in the new normal? And so that's what keeps me strong, and I'm able to bring that sort of, I would say, I don't know the right word is maturity, but it's just, I think, it's the school of hard knocks, right? You just learn to roll with the punches and stand up, and you say, you know what, tomorrow's another day, and I'm going to solve the problems I can solve today. And the things where I need help, I'm going to get help. And the things I cannot solve, I'm going to just say, okay, you know what, I'm going to figure out a way to work around them. So that's kind of what keeps me mentally strong. But I'll tell you, part of staying sane in a pandemic, sheltering in place, like I'm in a nice house, I would say it's a fixer-upper, but it's still a nice house. I have, 3 kids, right? 2 college kids, 1 high schooler. My parents live with me. Like there's 7 of us in a house. I can tell you a house is not big enough to have 7 people living full-time working and, right? Working, living, everything. The way I've kept saying is I have really prioritized mental and physical health for me and my teams. So, I mean, I can talk more about that if that's something that you want to.
I think it is. And I think it's something that we heard mentioned by some of the other speakers throughout the course of this event, but I don't think we actually gave it full focus. So if you're willing to share, I think we'd be interested about that. Yeah.
So one of the things I started to do, and, Archie Group, I know they're a sponsor for this event. They're very interested in my, all the things I accomplished in the last couple of months. I started walking, right? So I live in a neighborhood where I can walk. It's safe. And, it's just, that's the only thing I could do, right? Gyms are closed. And so it got to a point where, Zach, I now walk, and I'm pretty amazed when I look back at what I used to do or not used to do. I, on average, walk 55 miles a week.
Wow.
So every day I walk for 2 hours, it's split into 2 1-hour sessions. And it's a time that's not only just for me, I get away from having to cook dinner or dealing with, whatever crisis my children might be facing for the day, or, work issues. A lot of times I find that no matter how stressed I am, I put on my shoes, I go out there, and by the time I come back an hour later, I have moved on from that stress, right? I have either I've figured out a strategy for the next thing I'm stuck on, or I have just spent 30 minutes, maybe just, it's a form of meditation, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I just go
You
out
bring
there
your phone with you, Anu?
I do take my phone with me,
Okay.
but I don't answer calls, right? I have it more for tracking and, like, so my family knows where I am. Sometimes I'm out there at night walking by myself. And, we actually also, for the company, did a fitness challenge. So we kind of, we all got inspired. We did multiple virtual events, and we kind of, really pushed people to get out there and do anything. It can be anything they want, right? We just said record your minutes. We gave out prizes. It could be, working out at home. It could be walking. It could be biking. It could be meditation. And so what we found is that we've spent a lot of energies creating virtual events to stay connected to the team. And I'll tell you, the time we put in to help people focus on their physical and mental health is paying off for me as a CEO. My team is much more productive than they were even before the pandemic. We feel closer together as a team. And there's a real feeling of we care about each other and we're in this together. So for me, it's been like immense, health benefits. I mean, my doctor, when I had my last blood work, he called me because it was a pandemic and we weren't having, in person. He called me to ask me what changed because things were so different. He thought something radically changed in my life. And I said, I'm just walking.
Well, thank you.
So,
That's a very inspirational story. I want to go back to some of the conversation we had a little bit earlier about communication. And as CEO, particularly during a very turbulent time, what do you believe are the right levels of transparency and how much you share and how much you don't share with the team?
Yeah, so, there's multiple levels, right? When I think of a team, there's my executive team, that's my immediate, right? Then there's the larger company, like the team itself. Then there's board members and investors, and then there's, of course, external, right? So I prioritize basically, with my executive team, I would say they know exactly what's going on. We're all in this together, like in terms of the nitty gritty of the business, things I'm thinking about, things I'm exploring, things that are problems. And then with the employee base, we actually also talk about, we are as transparent as possible, meaning obviously we don't share everything that, some things are confidential, but LendUp employees know exactly where the company stands. When we make a decision, we actually walk through the decision process. And we're very candid about what's coming. We give them bad news when things look very dire. And then we also give them good news when things start to look better than we expected. And then, of course, I keep the board members and investors, very much in the know. And that's also, fairly frequent meetings, I would say at least once a month. But then I've kind of decided not to focus on external right now. So if you go to my LinkedIn or you just look in the social media, I'm not posting a lot because I'm really heads down, making sure that as a business, we can get to the other side of this, right? We need to live to fight another day. That's the motto, right? We need to get through the pandemic, help as many customers as we can, keep the employees as productive as we can, and come out of the other side with a very strong team and a very strong company.
Can you give us a little bit of flavor on what it means to walk through the decision-making process? You talked about describing that as you communicate.
So, without going into a lot of detail, right, we actually will once a month, like once we have the monthly data, we'll actually share in front of them. We'll tell them, hey, here's where we are financially, right? Without going into a lot of detail, we tell them, this is what our revenue look like. This is, what our cost looks like. These are the challenges we have in terms of solving for it. And then we actually work then in smaller teams to solve for specific issues. So now, if you poll the LendUp employees, I don't know if 100% of them will say, "Hey, I totally understood where Anu was coming from." I'm not sure, but when we did the furloughs, no one was surprised that was going to happen, because we had already kind of walked them through the process of, hey, we're looking at pulling back on lending, or not lending as a whole, but pulling back on how much we lend. We're looking at pulling back on XYZ, and therefore we expect, right, our revenues to drop by X%. And so we expect that we would want to cut costs by Y%. So that was already out there. By the time we came to the furlough, employees already knew. And some employees reached out through their managers and said, hey, before you make the decision on furloughs, just know that I'm willing to take a pay cut if it's going to help save somebody's job. So that's the level of open and transparent conversations we have in the company.
Wow, that's really impressive. So one of the things I think that is a side effect of the uncertainty of this period is doubt, really. And I would love to hear from you about how you deal with your own doubt or organizational doubt. Can you share some of your process?
Yeah, so it's kind of what I said before, right? I think doubt is inherent to all of us, right? Like every day, everybody deals with some level of doubt, right? I could tell you that I feel I've been successful, but I've also dealt with challenges, right? I've been laid off. I've questioned myself on, can I do this job, right? At the beginning of the pandemic, I hope I'm not the only CEO who said, wow, like, how do you deal with this, right? Am I doing the right thing? When if you make decisions, are you doing the right thing by your customers, your employees, your shareholders? Like, how do I make sure that I balance all of that? So doubt, I think, is part of who we are. And the way I approach it, and I don't know if that's helpful to share, the way I approach it is know that it's okay to not be sure if I'm doing the right thing. But in my mind, at this moment, this is the right thing, the best I can do, and this is what I strongly believe, then I'm going to move forward with it. And if it turns out that it was a mistake, then I'll course correct, right? But I also think through the things I want to do that I know I have to do, but I'm not sure how best to do it, then I do enlist help. So it's about figuring out what I'm good at, what I need help with, but ultimately being very clear on what is my end goal and what is the most thoughtful, most humane process to get to that end goal, right? If you keep people first, I think a lot of that clarity comes, and that's how I work through doubt. Doubt I think, is human nature. It's part of everything we do, right? From the smallest thing to whether you're cooking dinner, whether it's going to come out right, to making big decisions on either cost cuts or making a new deal. Should I go sign a new deal with another partner? Those are all, like, every decision has some level of doubt, and I think we just have to work through it and just know that mistakes can be made. It's how you recover from them that's important.
I think that's really sound advice. And I guess, how do you impart that to your team or to the greater organization? Like, it sounds like that's how you live your life and comport yourself, but how do you communicate that to the greater audience?
I don't know if how part of it is just I think walking the walk, right? So I do get in front of my team, the company, and kind of share how I process through things, but it's also how I react when someone else makes a mistake, right? I mean, it's not like my executive team is very clear. They know when something that they did or they said or something happened that we all at the end decided, hey, that probably wasn't the right thing to do. We talk about it, but then we also move on, right? We cannot say, okay, what is done is done. Let's figure out, if there's anything we need to fix, we fix it. But it's a lesson learned and we move forward. And I think the way you impart lessons like this is just be true to yourself and just, follow through, whether it's about mistakes I make or it's a mistake someone else on my team made, right? There's never just it's not you made this mistake, so you're out. That's not how we approach things at LendUp.
So you described 3 generations living in this house east of San Francisco. You've got a team. How do you, hold on one sec.
Hello.
Who was that?
Yeah, that was the name. It was on my profile first. So
Okay.
Sorry, we'll roll with the punches, right? Zach, like you said, this is.
I am continuing to roll with punches. We have 3 Paul Marguerites that are showing up on the conference. Paul actually spoke yesterday. He's the executive at JP Morgan, so I don't know how that's happening. None of them are him, actually. So,
Yeah, pretty
um,
funny.
so you have 3 generations living together. You have a large team at LendUp. Like, how do you prioritize who to take care of? And you have to take care of yourself, obviously, right? You're
Yes.
2 hours of walking a day. Like, how do you make those decisions?
You know, I wish there was like a magic thing, like a wand. I could tell you, "Hey, here's my process," right? I kind of organically came up with this, right? The first week was about just like the first 6 weeks work-wise, like I was consumed by it, right? Figuring out all of the things we just talked about, going into shelter in place, business impact, talking to board members, almost every other day call with my lender. And I have to say that my husband was supportive, right? Like he kind of took care of whatever he needed to take care of. We had to bring one of my daughters home from Michigan, right? Because everything was shutting down. And then, so all of that was happening at the same time. But once we got to, I would say 6 weeks in and some level of stability, we kind of, over time, we kind of figured out what works, right? My kids have their college classes. My husband has his work. We kind of had to divide up the space. I have to be very appreciative. He gave up the only office we have in the house to me. So that was, and then I take care of my parents as well. So I kind of, we figure out meal plans over the weekend. It's just, it's kind of like, it's what working parents have done forever and ever, but just doing it all from one place, right? So kind of putting boundaries with my kids, like right before this, I'll just share very candidly. Right before we have a family group text, I sent a text that, "Hey, I'm on a live interview." I had to tell my son, "Hey, please don't start playing your trumpet," because his room is right next to mine and you guys would have all had an impromptu trumpet, performance in the background. So things like that, we just kind of coordinate. And at the end of the day, for me, in the beginning, I would say I work 12, 15 hours a day. So now I've made it so that I walk 2 hours, right? So I do it when, for example, when I finish my work or when I take a break around 5 or 6 o'clock, I go for a 1 hour walk.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes if I'm not able to fit in the morning walk, then I'll do another one after dinner. So I've just made it so that no matter what's happening, I'm going to get those in. Similarly, meal plans, right? I kind of make sure between my husband and I, we plan out how the week is going to go and we just take turns. And so it is a lot of juggling, but in many ways, there's a lot of time saved. There's no commute time. I'm saving an hour and a half a day on commute, right?
Mm-hmm.
We're not shopping as much. There's no vacations. So in many ways, a lot of time came back, right? So I actually find that that piece hasn't been that hard after the first 6 weeks of trying to stabilize everything and getting all the kids home and getting them situated. And the business, I would say, somewhat stable. The other pieces kind of fell into place, but it does take a lot of planning, and on a day-to-day basis, it takes a lot of patience also, right?
Go ahead. I didn't mean to cut you off.
No, go ahead.
Well, one of the things I just want to comment on is like, you're running, I guess as of last March, you guys had lent out over $2 billion. I don't know what that number is now, but just you bring such humanity to your leadership role. And it's just something that is impressing upon me just listening here to how you approach this crazy time that we're living in.
Yeah, Zach, and I've heard, I have had people tell me that. And part of it is, we all have to remember, right? We're all human beings first. I mean, yes, I'm CEO today. I was not CEO 2 years ago, right? And you can't take anything for granted. It's just, life is what it is. And my goal is to be successful, not just for myself, but for every employee at LendUp, for every investor who ever put money into LendUp, and for our customers. And along the way, if I can help people through just, being a good leader and being transparent and helpful, I think that to me is a bigger accomplishment, right? At the end of the day, when you look back at our lives, I mean, this would be an unprecedented time. We could all say we lived through that, right? And I think it's going to make a difference who comes out of it mentally strong versus you could be financially strong. But I think the important thing coming out of this is we all need to figure out how to come out of this mentally strong, right? This change is semi-permanent. I don't, like, some things will go back to the way it used to be, but many things will not. So we all have to figure out personally and professionally how we navigate the new world.
So I would love to hear a little bit more about that. Do you see this as a new normal? And if it is, like, what, how do you prepare for the future given these kind of these constraints?
Right. So I do think, some of it, right, like return to work. I know a lot of large tech companies have said, hey, they may, over time, they may just go to 100% remote, right? I mean, I don't know if it'll be 100%, but if you think about sort of the work culture, it is permanently changed, right? Like we've all had to figure out how to look better on Zoom and the lighting and all that, but also just working through the, every day as you make decisions, what is the best way to make decisions? What I found in shelter in place that my executive team and I are closer than before, right? In many ways, we have 24/7 access to them. Not that I use it, but my point is, before, in an office setting, you have to say, oh, go find this person, or this person's like, now it's like everyone's online, the Slack, the Zoom. I do think we're more productive, but I do think we all miss that social connection, right? I miss seeing my team. I miss the virtual events. So I do think more and more people will work from home by choice, or companies might say, hey, we don't want to spend on office space. I'd rather take that money and give you an allowance for your office at home, and spend more money on your well-being. So I think that part of it is probably going to stay. And as I think through it, I would say from a product perspective, transformation to digital has been going on for years, right? Maybe decades, maybe 1 or 2 decades, but it's just going to accelerate that change. So I find that as a team, we're more productive. We're able to build products faster. And we're also able to look at it from a lens of, if I can create a digital product that the customer can self-serve, then it's even better for them, right? Because LendUp already works without physical branch locations, right? So for us, that transition wasn't hard, but it is making me think through what does the next iteration of LendUp products look like, right? It's going to be more reliant on digital, not less. And our teams perhaps can be global, right? Like we used to be in San Francisco. I moved it to Oakland, and we were all in Oakland, but now we're all scattered all over the Bay Area. That begs the question, when we go to hire, do we have to hire in California? I think right now I'm still saying yes, because state by state employment laws are different and we're a small team. But I think you will see companies are going to relax that, right? People should be, I read that Bahamas has an open invitation for people to show up for a year and work from there. So I do think it's going to change.
Anu, thank you so much for addressing us at the inaugural Resilience Conference. I learned a ton, and I really appreciate you sharing your experience and the LendUp experience as well.
Thank you, Zach. I love this opportunity. I'm glad I could share, and let's keep in touch. And I'm happy to share more of my thoughts, but also I'm hoping to log in and listen to some of the other sessions. So thank you.
Wonderful. I hope you'll join us for the rest of the conference. So we're going to take a 5-minute bio break, and then we'll return back here with our PR panel, which will be the final panel of the day. So I'm just going to put pause, and I'll release you as well.
All right. Thank you. Bye.
Bye-bye.